Anyone over the age of 10 with normal intelligence can understand the greatest truths as long as they are explained in a way that is easy to understand and has real-life uses. This is especially true when discussing metaphysics and philosophy in a way that is understandable to them. They are filled with valuable lessons on how to live a successful, happy, and safe life, free from all the common problems people face. But the complex language is hard for the average person to understand. It looks like the great teachers and thinkers didn't want to share the wealth with the majority. Instead, they tried to hide it behind verbal barriers and special language. As my teacher, Dr. Hamer Fax, told me to, I'm just trying to follow his lead by putting this spiritual gem into the language of everyday life, albeit in a shortened form. This page doesn't have anything new. Since Enoch, which the Bible connects to the sixth son of Adam, everything has been written down. Jesus lived in secret for a long time and went to the Essene monastery of Cumbre to learn from Enoch's lessons. Later, when there was a fight between Jews and Christians, all of Enoch's writings were gathered together and burned by both sides, except for a few copies that were used to hide people. In the first few hundred years, Christians tried to get rid of any evidence that the Master's teachings came from Jews. At the same time, Jews said Jesus was not Jewish and burned anything that could link him to them. The leaders of the Christian church changed and tampered with their texts so that it looked like the message came from Enoch. What came out of this was the New Testament, which hides the truth at its core. The damage also killed the abbey, but the Essenes were able to save their valuable library. They hid it in the caves that are still being found and are now known as the Dead Sea Caves. The Rockefeller Group has set up a big building in the area to verify and explain the scrolls that are showing up. These include the originals of Enoch's writings and the original Bible texts. According to dynamic Christianity, a person must get directions or learn the method they need to do something before they start. But people are the only ones who choose to live without a guide or a clear plan, depending only on secondary sources and not thinking about how to get ready in the first place. So, he goes into a maze like this, trying not to fall into evil. Some people live their lives between being rich and happy, while others live their lives in pain. The first group starts with all the good things that education, science, health, faith, and love and luck can offer, but they are followed by a quick path of disasters. What is the cause of this group of differences? What you think will come true is the first rule of creation, not just in your body and personality, but also in the outside world, in the things that happen to you and the settings you are in. What you see happening is your own idea. In the event that you believe that being healthy is a natural state for people, then you are naturally healthy. If you think that being rich is a given, you will always be rich. If you think that your fate is to be poor, get hurt, die, get old and sick, or have bad luck or good luck, you will either be a victim of evil or deserve. This faith. You will now understand that faith is a method, a way of living. There are two kinds of trust, fear and faith. They are the same thing and force. If you hope for the best, you have faith. If you hope for the worst, you have fear. Yes, it is as easy as it sounds. Fear means that you think something bad is going to happen and are eagerly waiting for it with all your heart. You call it, so it has to answer, because you sent it. It doesn't wait for you. When you realize you're having an affair, you usually say with a cocky smirk, "I already knew it. I sensed it." Of course you were right, but now you'll see that it wasn't doomed to happen and that your higher powers or plain gifts told you that. It happened because your thought attracted the things that were needed for it to happen. When you have a feeling along with a thought, it comes true faster and stronger. The first law says this: fear is a strong emotion, which is why everything that comes from putting fear and thought together is so scary. People die or become disabled in car crashes, have heart attacks, get cancer, get stomach ulcers, and do a lot of other horrible things. Without a question, I can see you thinking about the material reasons of all of these things. I can see you protesting inside because the material cause has always been important. For instance, the germs and bacteria that make a lot of people sick. It's not the case that these viruses and germs cause anything, though. The first reason is in the mind. The germ is just one link in a chain. The sickness is the next step. My goal is to lead backwards in the order of creation, not forward. The material cause is a product that is already made, and the general form has been thought of. Everything else that comes after, on the outside, is just the stuff that can be used to make the work. You get it. Fear and faith are like two sides of the same coin. Faith and fear are next to each other. Fear is a bad thing, while faith is a good thing. People don't worry about things that they don't think are bad. When you think something with faith, it comes true quickly and strongly. Just like you can learn to be afraid, you can also learn to have faith. Knowing how to do it helps. All fear goes away when you learn how to use the tools of faith. You know that this is where the city of your country is. That's what you know, because someone taught it to you. You are sure that whether you take the train, the plane, or the car to get to the capital, you will get to the capital and not the moon. That's faith then. You believe that the capital is real and that your need or desire will lead you there. You believe you can get there and you're not scared of the moon. Faith gets rid of fear and knowledge gets rid of doubt. At that point, you know that thinking negatively has an effect they call bad, and thinking positively has an effect they call good. You know what can happen when you mix danger with fear. People in churches and good people have thought that those bad things that happen because of fear and negative thinking are punishments from God. You understand how big the mistake is. Jesus said, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." This phrase, "so is he," sums up everything we've talked about so far. Thought and feeling are one. He thinks in his heart, because people and their world are one. There is no separation between man and everything he creates, owns, collects, and reproduces in his surroundings. He and everything else is a perfect reflection of the picture he holds in his mind. As thou thinkest in thy soul, so art thou. Proverbs 23:7. This was even more clear from Solomon. The way our minds work, we think of an endless number of different things all day and night. In the mind, there is a kind of steady but detached movie picture. There are a lot of thoughts, but one of them stops us. We think about them, put them aside, maybe talk about them with someone else, and then think about them again later. These thoughts turn into pictures in your mind. The thought picture goes through the mind, stays there, and comes back. This is what psychiatrists call a mirror. Psychologists only study the instincts that control our actions and feelings. Metaphysicians study a lot more than just the physical world. They know that instincts control everything that happens to a person. If we think about or study an idea a lot, it will become a powerful part of our mind. The inner mind doesn't think or differentiate, it just does its job. It can't protest or act on its own free will, and it doesn't understand comedy or tell the difference between what we told it to do being serious or funny. Its main job is to store mental pictures and then present them to the outside world as if they were copies. It works like a printer, sending what's stored there to be printed. It works like a robot, a great service that means we don't have to remember and use everything we've learned since the beginning of time, even when we were just a drop of water in the ocean. The only files it keeps are the mental pictures we give it. This makes it a great filing clerk and library. Once we give it a picture, it will keep making copies of it until we tell it to change them. We put things in it over time, and it prints out what we have saved. It will keep doing this as long as we are living. For instance, you can remember the first time someone talked about having a cold. You are too young to remember. You didn't question the news because it came from your parents. You just took it as being true. In later years, you learned to fear it and were told what causes colds. You were also told that you would get a cold if you got cold sweat on your little body, touched a cold person, stood in a draft, or got a drizzle. All of that was seen in your thoughts in small bits and pieces. It went into your subconscious, and you never had to remember the advice your parents gave you again. You didn't think about them after that. But every time your body got cold, every time you were in a draft, every time a cold came near you, or every time you got a cold sore, your subconscious mind replicated a good cold, the best one it could make. That being said, you never had to think about it again, but the order is still in your mind. Even now, it gives you a wonderful cold every time you don't take care of yourself because you are used to doing so. You even tell your friends about it. I can't stand a draft, just like you tell them. Run away from anyone who has a cold, just like you say. Don't come near me because I have a cold, and you even call them my cold. My cold, which all goes over and over the direction that was given to my mind as if it needed it. This is how all the other bad things that happen to people work, like death, accidents, fights, old age, poverty, bad luck, moral ugliness, sins, disasters, wars, financial crises, feuds, and so on, work. Men are different, but the process of having children is always the same. The first rule of creation is what I'm going to talk about. It's called the principle of mentalism. This is the mental world. This is what metaphysics means when it says, all is mind. There are 7 rules of creation, and the truth of being is that we don't have to suffer forever because of a bad idea. We are free, and if we want to, we can change it for something that makes us happy, gives us benefits, and brings us gifts. So the new picture is made in the same way that the old one was made. We just have to erase the old one and fill the space with the new one, just like a wrong letter is erased in a word to replace it with another letter or get rid of it. The best way to get rid of everything bad in your life, according to experience, is to think and say out loud every time something bad happens. I do not accept it. I deny it. I reject it. Don't get mad. Say what you want to say without stressing it. Do this quietly, knowing that what you say is an order that must be carried out right away, no matter what. It's possible that you won't notice the change in yourself. If you aren't paying close attention to the little signs, you might not see the result right away, but the result will be based on how much faith and confidence you feel when you say no. If you have a lot of faith and confidence, the result will happen right away, like a miracle. Because of our past, we know that you can't leave a gap empty or half empty. You have to fill it right away. When you're done saying the bad things, you need to say the good things. In philosophical terms, the truth is the new picture that will be marked and will always show the good things. It's important to us that this picture is the best one possible, that it's the whole truth and not just part of the truth, because Jesus taught us that God is truth and goodness. Every person has God inside them. They can see, know, and sometimes feel Him during their time on earth. The Father shows this side of Himself when He is given His new child, when He falls in love for the first time, when He risks His own life to save someone who is about to hit by a car, when He feels sorry for someone else's pain, and when He forgets about Himself to do something heroic. At those times, the divine being acts. After that, the human morality takes over, which isn't a bad thing. It's just a place where development happens, or where things lie dormant. The divine being is the truth for everyone, including you and me. He is perfect and beautiful, never fails or changes, doesn't get sick or die, doesn't suffer, doesn't struggle, doesn't lack to learn, knows everything, doesn't fear or doubt, and is always listening to our smallest prayers. He is the perfect truth. He is love, wisdom, life, truth, soul, spirit, and principle. In other words, he is all 7 parts of God. This is because the divine being is God's Son and a cell of God. Like a drop of water in the ocean is not the ocean itself, but all the parts of the ocean can be found in a single drop of water. This is not pantheism. She is a sea cell. Our awareness is resting, limited, like a rosebud that slowly opens. We don't know how to figure out what is good and true, so we want someone to show us, teach us, and tell us what picture we need to etch. We have that person in the divine being. He told them, "Know the truth, and you will be free." When you want to make a new picture to replace the old one, all you have to do is remember the holy being. Just remember him right away, and he will help you make the new image. In the original case, let's say you have a cold. You already know that it's because of the picture you have stored in your mind, and you know that the cold is just a mirror. Some people like getting sick because it makes them feel important. So if you don't like the cold, you just deny it, reject it, and don't accept it. Then you remember who you are as a holy being. If you change your thought of the cold to the truth of being, it plugs into the truth that goes with it, like a plug into a phone line. And you see the new picture you need to take, life, which is the opposite of life. I am life, you must say out loud. I am life. Life is health, and health is the only truth. Keep going along that road as long as you want to. Don't forget that you are making a picture. Think positively. The more you see it, the better it is for you. This is not the same as autosuggestion, which is just saying a positive, thought-provoking word over and over again, like a bird. Autosuggestion doesn't work, and doesn't just skim the top without getting to the bottom of things and finding out what caused them. The truth of being examines, solves, enters, and kills the cause. It also cleans, heals, and renews the mind, making it stronger. It also moves a person forward and expands his awareness. It really is a bold and safe cure for the effects, and the sins, because these are also mirrors and etched pictures. What you will see is that the basic sin is just the idea. In other words, the picture that makes the mirror. The churches think it's because of people. It's important to remember that the holy being always lives in the place we call heaven, which means good. This is also the purest truth. When you connect with a setting, you will more likely bring that environment into your daily life. The feeling that is most like what God's children must always feel is the one we get when we receive a wonderful gift. When we thank someone for a gift that makes us happy, we feel something similar. It's a mix of joy and kindness, right? That is the state of someone who lives in heaven, and that is what a divine being is like. Evil moves away from people who are in this state of mind because it can't stand it, because it doesn't fit its nature. So, the third step that experience has taught us to take in practicing the truth of being is this. When you're done with what metaphysical language calls a treatment, which is denying and affirming, always thank God, as if you had already won the prize. End your treatment with a statement of deep gratitude for the good that you have already received. This shows that you have hope. Believe in things you can't see, as St. Paul said, and Jesus said, believe that you will receive when you pray, and you will receive. The Bible writes about this and goes into more detail about it. Of course, in biblical terms, it was so hidden and symbolic that it took the hard work of specialists in semantics, linguistics, classical philology, and symbolism to figure out what it meant. They are called Manasseh and Ephraim in the Bible, which has a lot to say about them. If anyone wants to live forever, he must deny himself and then follow me, Jesus the Christ taught. He didn't mean to follow the man Jesus, but the Christ. The word Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, which means the Anointed One, which means the Son of God and the truth. As I said at the beginning, my goal in the New Testament is to explain in simple terms, at the level of a person over 10 years old and with average intelligence, what the metaphysical, philosophical, psychological and religious treatises mean. These are hard for most people to understand, so they are completely forbidden and looked down upon, even though they are a valuable treasure. Everything I'm talking about here isn't new. It's all been said, found and taught since the beginning of time. People just don't pay attention to or understand it. What I'm about to say in simple terms can be found in any book on biology written in hard intellectual language. A reaction happens in the brain medulla when you frown and wrinkle your face. It moves down with the fluid in your spine and into your liver through a process called osmosis. Cholesterol is changed into bile once it gets into the liver. Your bile changes your mood, making you angry, and your angry mood makes you frown and wrinkle your face. It's a terrible cycle that keeps you in a horrible environment where evil is at ease, feeds and grows, and attracts other evil things that are floating around. Let's do it the other way around to see what happens. Every time you feel your brow frown and face wrinkle, or every time you look in the mirror and see how you look, make yourself smile and relax those tense muscles. It's good for your health and your mind. The cerebral fluid changes right away, and when it gets to the liver, it's like a bath of grace. You feel blessed and happy, you breathe deeply, and your face lights up. You're in heaven, where bad things don't thrive and only good things happen. He said this to explain the second rule of creation, which is called the principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. This means that you can choose to live in heaven or hell. For our needs, the example I gave you in the last 2 lines is enough. You'll see that the body and the spirit work hand in hand. They have to move and act together, and we can't separate them. When a person is happy, he or she is serving the divine being. When a person is sad, they are moving away from the divine being, which means they are not serving God, since the divine being in each person is a cell of God and is the Son of God. The Word was with God in the beginning, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and lived among us. In this way, the Apostle began his message. From the beginning, people thought that the Word could only be Jesus Christ. It is said that John wrote the first 14 lines of his Gospel as a lesson and a philosophical statement to get ready for what he was going to say, so that everything would be true. I summed up the stanzas so that these texts wouldn't be too long. The statement has nothing to do with the faith. At that time, literary and grandiose language was all the rage, and the verb meant the same thing as the word. The word is the spoken thought, and John used it in this way to make the truth speak for him in his words. The command for him to show up was, became flesh, and the fact that he lived among us confirms that command and brings us good luck at the same time. We are amazed at how well the master of Christian metaphysics himself was able to describe what it means for he became flesh and dwelt among us. In one stroke, he also affirms faith. The Bible is a poem, and faith is proof of things we haven't seen yet. Jesus said, "By your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." There is no other way to say this truth. He also said, "What comes out of a man's mouth is what defiles him, because what comes out of his mouth comes from his heart." This was another clear way of saying the same thing. He told the Jews this to show that they were wrong to think that some things were wrong, like the idea that it was wrong to eat with Gentiles. But the churches haven't taken any of this seriously, and the people, especially the priests, keep talking nonsense, without realizing that everything they say is a command that shows up in their lives and that God's will is something bad and hard to accept. You should make it a goal to pay attention to everything you say for one day. You will be surprised at how many bad things you say. People use these phrases all the time. Business is terrible. Things are terrible. Youth is lost. Traffic is unbearable. Service is unbearable. You can't get service. Don't leave that money there because they'll steal it. Bandits are everywhere. You're going to fall. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to break that glass. I have such bad luck. I can't do that. It hurts me. My rheumatism, my allergy, my headache, my digestion problems. That is a bandit. That is a wretch, etc. Once the decision is made, it comes true, and everything that isn't true in light of the truth of being is a lie. This includes everything that is said out of habit, without even thinking about it, because everything that was written with words and feelings and accepted by thought comes from the heart. Of course, the images are already metaphysically crystallized in the subconscious because they come from many past lives. At first, your conscience won't see how everything can be changed, but by winding the rope, you can reach the thread. All you need is a little goodwill and the desire to start or undo all the crystallization. Every time you have a negative thought, just say no to it and go to the truth of being. Thank God with all your heart for the wonderful chance you were given to clean your subconscious and heal your soul. All at once you confessed, repented and forgave, because confession and forgiveness only work in front of yourself. If you are Catholic, you can follow the rules of your church, but you have to forgive yourself first. People who hate themselves because they failed at something will never forgive themselves. This is called pride and payback. What gives them the right to ask someone else to forgive them? He said, "A man out of his evil wealth brings forth evil things, and out of his good wealth he brings forth good things." Love your neighbor as yourself means that you can love yourself first, and then your neighbor. It means that you can treat yourself with respect and honor, accept yourself as you are without making too many demands, and know that it's okay to fail and okay to forgive. First, to say the word of truth out loud to yourself so that you can say it out loud to your friend. The word is spoken thought, and it is controlled by the first law of creation, which is also known as the principle of mentalism in ancient texts. I've already talked about this first law in the first 4 chapters, and this chapter is the last one I'll write about it in detail. I talked about the second law of creation, also known as the principle of correlation, in the previous chapter, because all of the laws are connected and rely on each other. This was a good time to bring it up again. Vibration. A quick shaking is what the language says vibration is. Most people think that vibrations only cause music, but everything does. Speed, or the number of movements that happen in 1 second, is used to measure vibration. This vibration has a frequency of a number, which means it moves at that frequency. The color white is the one that moves at the highest frequency, making it the color that we see in light. It's also where people of all colors come together. Even though it can only be seen in shadows and has the lowest frequency of all, 0 frequency for us, it is still there. Like how waves form when a stone falls into water, thoughts send out ripples that go in all different directions. They're also colored. Because negative thoughts are dark, they have low levels. That's a good name for them, black thoughts. Having good thoughts makes you shine, and as they get closer to the truth, they get brighter and brighter until they shine when they talk about the total truth, which is God. High frequencies are stronger than low frequencies. Thoughts of high truth blow away low, dark, and false ones like a bomb going off on a rock. This will show you what happens when you put the truth in your thoughts and words into a group of crystals. That's why I told you that the felt desire was enough to start breaking down the crystallizations that had built up in the mind. There are people who have built up proof. We all have that ability, but most of us haven't used it much. The color of a thought tells them what kind of thought it is, and because they know what each type of thought does, they can tell what will happen in the future. They can clearly see what each person will turn into. Thoughts of love and kindness are pink and strong. The color of physical desire is fiery red. Life's thoughts are yellow. The color of wisdom is now called chartreuse, which means it is very bright. They are shimmery and a deep violet color. The tone gets dirty when bad things are mixed with these colors. On the other hand, mustard is the color for someone whose mind is still not fully formed or directed. When someone is sexually aroused and doesn't understand why, their desire is a dark brown color. Mental impulses wrap around the body in the shape of an egg, and the colors that come from each thought can be seen in that egg-shaped cloud. When your mind is clean and happy, it makes bright, colorful art, like the Orient of the Pearl. Negative thoughts from the outside can't get into a positive energy and surroundings because the high frequencies are stronger than the low frequencies. You would have to become sensitive to them, which means you would have to train yourself to think badly for them to get into your head. The law of attraction says that everything that is like it will attract more of the same. Images that are deeply rooted in the mind will always draw to them things that are similar and push away things that are not connected. That's why, if a person's idea is good, he only sees good things. Since he can't draw things that aren't good, bad things can't get close to him. On the other hand, someone with closed ideas only experiences bad things because they can't draw anything else. This is why there is something called the contagion of panic. You have noticed that your anger and hatred grow when you focus on meditation or think about something bad that happened or someone who hurt you. Now you know that when you think similar thoughts, they come to you and make your feelings stronger. Those you already know, it's like the thoughts that go along with them join together and get stronger, creating a downward circle of negativity that can hurt your mental health. It's important to be aware of this process and learn how to change your thinking to be more upbeat and helpful. This law never gives itself the chance to entertain your mind with a single bad thought. When it thinks about it, it rejects it, compares it to the truth of being, and then thinks of something good right away. I hope you've understood how important it is to keep laughing while you're living in paradise. The law of attraction says that if you think positively, good things will come to you. Thoughts leave the mind and look for other thoughts to join with. There are huge groups of thoughts in the air, like clouds. If people in a city think negatively about it as a whole, the clouds will be dark grey, hover over it, and go wherever they are drawn. They keep everyone in the same idea, which is why people of different races and nationalities have different traits. Have you ever felt like the mood of a house hit you as soon as you walked in? Have you ever felt what it's like to be at a funeral or a burial? Do you ever feel like your feelings are heavy when you walk through an empty house and don't know why? I went with a friend to look for an apartment not long ago. When we walked into a very nice-looking, very classy, and seemingly very believable one, we both had a very bad feeling and talked about it. The next day, we learned that a lot of terrible things had happened there. People with good attitudes make things better. The dark masses run away a long way, but they come back when the noise is gone. A skilled metaphysician who comes into touch with such a place leaves a permanent advantage because his presence alone drives out the darkness. As when you turn on a light, the night goes away. So where does the darkness go when the sun comes up? It gets light in nowhere. As someone who has already changed their ideas and made it a habit to check in with and connect everything with the holy being, they have the power to break other people's crystallizations just by thinking the truth. In the face of evil people who hurt other people, this is why Jesus healed and did miracles. The order to love our neighbor as ourselves does not mean that we have to be friendly. Let people who hate and hurt you know you forgive them, do good things for them, and turn the other way. All of this means that when we see evil sneak into someone else, we should remember that person is holy and tell the truth. Easy, easy, easy. There is no other sensible way to get rid of any anger we might have. I forgive, but I cannot forget, is something that people often say. Do what I told you if you are one of these. You do not need to talk to the person who makes you feel bad. You don't need to look at her. You shouldn't look at her because you can't take your mind off of what she did to you. As you read this, just picture your divine self. It is the same in everyone. If you turn to this one, you'll immediately know what treatment to give. That is, the aspect of truth that you should use against hatred and discord, love against disease and the threat of death, life against stupidity, intelligence against disorder, principle against illogical barriers, arbitrary boundaries, and legal prohibitions. To help you learn how to use truth well, I'll give you a few examples. Passport problems, document delivery delays, transit problems, bureaucratic red tape, and political and governmental inconsistencies. In spite of all this, remember that the Spirit is holy. God is Spirit. Whoever stops, slows down, obstructs, bans, or builds silly hurdles against God. Just what is stopping the Spirit from going? All of this is true. Thought that turns into truth pulses at the greatest level, and no lower level can control it. Fear or anger mixed with a thought of truth is the only thing that could go wrong. You have to be calm when you do any spiritual work. Even more was expected of me by my master. He said that all spiritual work should be done like drawing on a spider's web. We need to be very careful with spiritual thought energies because they are very powerful and have a high frequency. Vibration is the third law of making things. There is no such thing as an empty space. There is more proof of this now than ever before. The air is full of atoms and tiny bits of dust. Because it is the start of matter, the atom is half spirit and half matter. Spirit because it's energy that can't be seen. At the point where matter and spirit meet, the atom is in the middle. Silence is not good for nature. A small pot of dirt is left alone and forgotten. Not long from now, a little green spikelet will have grown in it. Another example is a jar of water. It won't be long before it shows tiny living cells moving around quickly. Nature also doesn't like trash. Everything is getting better at what it does. Everything is there for a reason and fits exactly where it's supposed to. Every person on earth comes with a job to do and a place ready for them. They also come with a special gift that helps them fit in with their job and position. Every person is different, just like every fingerprint is different in the world and in the history of the earth. The place he thinks he is his alone. He is the only one who can do the job well. If the spot that belongs to him is quickly taken by someone else, they will both feel let down and uncomfortable, and what they are doing right now is wrong. It's easy to find work that fits our skills, whether they are in business, the arts, writing, church, government, or farming. Everyone is ready to find their own place. He is doing the thing he loves doing most, the thing that doesn't look like work. When he is doing it, he forgets about everything else, and he thinks it's silly to get paid to do it because he is having so much fun. All of this fits with the second rule of creation, which is about how things are connected. If you feel like an outcast, find the one thing you really enjoy doing. Tell yourself that your place is waiting for you. Find people who like the same things you do and head toward the place you like the most. Then ask your holy being to show you the way. Speaking the truth to someone who doesn't have a job or a reason to live is also something you should do if you see them. Tell them that unemployment is a mistake, that chaos is caused by chaos, that nothingness, disorder, and waste don't exist. All the parts of this world work together to keep things in order. Tell the truth when you need something, whether it's a screw or a mate, a spoon or a certain amount of money, a place to park your car or a good cook. Nature hates nothingness, disharmony, and disharmonies. Adding something will show up in some way. Someone doesn't have enough of what you do, and someone does have too much of what you do not have. One of the fourth laws of creation is supply and demand. It is the idea of order. A young man told me this very thing. He was getting matched up wrong everywhere and losing all of his spots. He said, "I'm not good at anything. I don't do anything well." I asked him, "What do you like to do?" He said, "Nothing. I like having nothing to do." "And how come you lose all the spots?" "Because I get bored with them and start talking to my co-workers. I take their attention away and they waste company time." "So your co-workers like to listen to what you have to say?" "Well, yes, they forget about work and time," I replied. "Well, let's not look any further. If what you say and how you say it is so magnetic, you should work in public relations. Look for it until you find it. It's waiting." And it did. When I found him again, he was happy and full. I'm remembering the truth that Jesus meant when he said, "Look at the birds of the air. They don't plant or harvest crops or store them in barns, but your heavenly Father feeds them. Watch how the field lilies grow. But I promise you that not even Solomon, in all his glory, was dressed like one of them. They don't work or weave." We shouldn't think that this means we can be lazy and that food and clothes will just fall from the sky. It means that everyone will have everything they need right where they belong without having to work hard for it. Birds don't plant seeds, blind people, or gather in barns. People do these things because they make them feel good. Birds are important because they keep the flying species alive and help the heavenly plane. In human life, their job is to restore sight and hearing. The flowers, on the other hand, aren't meant to spin cloth. Their only job is to grow, and in addition to making the world a more beautiful place to look at, they provide honey and pollen to help the bees do their job. The big mind takes care of everything else. In this way, we are all in balance, happy, and doing the good that was given to us in our natural state. The law's last part is the higher mind, which is also the right of awareness. There were hundreds of lives before the one we are living now. We were an atom, a drop of water, plants, minerals, animals, and people. Before we became gods, we were men and women many times. The things we learned at each level were appropriate for that level because we have been in all of them. If we are living in a time of benefits, comforts, and technological progress, it is because we have earned it along the way. Everything we own, whether we got it as a gift, inherited it, or bought it, we have now because we learned how to use and get used to it in a past life. The object's picture is already in our minds, and it won't go away unless we do. In philosophical terms, this right that can be gained is known as the right of consciousness. This means that we can never lose anything, and that nothing, not even a diamond or money, can ever be stolen from us. How is it possible to lose or steal a picture that is deeply ingrained in our minds? It's not possible. Jesus said, "Do not store up treasures on earth, where thieves steal and moths destroy." This is part of the fourth law of creation. Most people think this means we should value morals over material things and store our riches in heaven, where moths and thieves can't damage or steal them. But that's not true. This is what the teacher added to the law. For where your treasure is, there is your heart. We already knew what he meant by heart. Furthermore, the line he used, "For what is in your heart is your treasure," was changed and mistranslated when it was taken from the Aramaic language that Jesus spoke to the Latin language. As soon as you lose or miss an object, remind yourself that you have it by right of conscience, etched in your memory, and that this picture will not change. This will make the object appear again. It will be given back to you by someone. You will either find it on your own or get a gift like it without having to do anything. The thing will come back to you from now on because you know this law and follow it. Do not forget about it. Don't worry or be scared of thieves. You start to feel good about it, and no one can get close to you. For someone who wants to steal, I suggest that you take the test the next time you lose something. Say this: "Nothing that is mine by right of conscience can be lost or stolen." then thank God for giving us such a great gift in the form of a wise law. As soon as the thing comes back to you, which won't take long, thank God again. When I was in school, my teacher would say that someone who knew and practiced the law of the right of conscience could leave a large bill in the middle of a busy street, and no one would be able to find it the next day. Obviously, he had to already have the idea and have no longer been afraid of thieves in order to find it again in the same place. I know that the first time I broke the law just because I had to, without having a strong desire to do so, was in New York when I forgot my glasses in a taxi. When I got home, I realized I had lost them. I immediately told the truth, because I had just come from metaphysics class. Nothing that is mine by right of conscience can be lost. My glasses will come back to me. They are where they belong, in front of my eyes. 4 days later, I was called down to the counseling office to talk to a cab driver who was looking for me. "Ma'am, will these glasses be yours?" he asked as he held out the lenses. "Yes, they are mine," I said. "How did it occur to you that they were mine?" "Look what a strange thing has happened to me. We cab drivers have to deliver all forgotten items to the office in case they are claimed by the customer who dropped them off. I couldn't decide to hand in these glasses since the office keeps a record of all. Wanted was just a whim. So we should always ask or desire things that are in line with the will of the Father. This way, we can be sure that what we bring into the world will make us happy. The reward is strong. In order to test yourself, put 2 plants next to each other and water them both every day. Then, praise and bless one of the plants. Love it and say nice things to it. Take care of the other one, but don't praise or bless it. It will happen for you to see. Do not give up when you are in a bad or unpleasant situation. Say right away, "It is for the best. I bless the good that is in everything it contains." By blessing it, you make its power stronger and more real. The bad thing that seemed bad will turn into a great gift and happiness because you will have turned it into a good experience. Don't bless other people. May the divine being in them be blessed. Do not bless someone who is sick. Thank the healthy part of the body that is showing a lie. Thank you for the health and truth in it. It is important that you never say anything that hurts other people. Do not do to others what you would not have them do to you, is written in the law. That is like a boomerang and doesn't forgive. People will do what you do to them, and then they will do it to you. If you wish someone bad luck, bad things will happen to you. People will say bad things about you and criticize you if you do those things. You will get help when you need it most if you help someone else. People will forgive you if you do. The beat is like a swing. If someone hurts you, don't bless them. Bless their holy being. Think of something else, and then tell him to be nice to you. That is, if you do something without meaning to hurt or bother other people, no one will notice or feel it. When someone bothers you, bless an unknown angel in them. You can be sure he will tell you something good or useful. Declare the unity of your being if you don't want to be put off from your work. Interrupting someone in the middle of their work is not peaceful, and God is there with them. At the same time, it's not the right time. It is not possible for God to be split in two and have 2 different parts that are at odds with each other. This is how the world is made. The male and feminine principles are the source of everything. Thought is manly or good. The soul is feminine, which means it is bad. Now you understand what would have been hard for you to understand at first. For a thought to come true, it needs to join or marry with a feeling. Moods and emotions are stored in the brain. The study of the soul has taken up too much of men's time, so I have barely named it. The soul is that scary ghost that sometimes shows up, and it's also where our feelings live. The spirit plane is where people's souls live. You must have heard a lot of people talk about it. Psychic forces are in charge of that plane. It is the place where strange things happen, like spiritualism, mediumship, and some magnetic displays, among other things. The plane is very nice, funny, and interesting, but it can also be scary at times. Few people who study it because they are fascinated by its strange appearances stay there. They don't get better emotionally or financially, even though they all think they are living in the truth. The people who study the astral plane are never rich, happy, or healthy in the body. They don't learn how to fix their problems and flaws. Like the rest of the ignorant, they have bad ideas and see evil. Christ said, "You will know them by their fruits." People will talk to the souls of the dead, or run to see people who can read minds, throw cards, or see into the future to solve their problems. These spirits or souls that have come to earth are always at the same level of development as the person who calls them. This is because a person can only draw things that are the same level of awareness as themselves. Most of the time, the advice they get is inconsistent, depending on the spirit giving it, and they lead their victims from confusion to disaster. People who are psychic and study the astral plane try to amaze others with the strange things they know, but aren't allowed to share. Without the help of the holy being and truth, cycling drives them crazy because the mental plane turns into a maze with no way out. To that plane, Jesus referred when he said, "Wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter by it. For the gate is narrow, and the way is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. The narrow gate is that which, nevertheless, opens to the breadth of life. It looks towards the divine being, for by looking at the good, good is produced. By always looking to the shadow, nothing but shadow is made manifest. By their fruits ye shall know them." In Genesis chapter 30 verse 30, we find this axiom, "By their fruits ye shall know them." This teaching is illustrated in the following story. After having served Laban, his wife's father, for many years with efficiency and loyalty, without receiving any reward, Jacob asked his father-in-law for wages. Laban asked him, "What do you want in return?" And Jacob answered, "I will serve all of your goats that are striped, spotted, or speckled." These were for me, along with the offspring that have stripes, spots, or speckles. Laban accepted the deal and separated the goats and billy goats, as Jacob had requested. Then Jacob cut sticks of poplar, hazel, and eastern plane tree and peeled slats of wood on them so that they showed the white underneath, contrasting with the dark bark. He then placed these rods in the watering troughs of Laban's cattle. Every time the cattle drank water and saw the rods, the calf they bore would come out spotted, striped, and splashed, just as Jacob had requested. Thus, their herds increased in an extraordinary way. It is important to note that this story is not a moral lesson, but to expound the law in the biblical manner that what is seen is reproduced. The astral being is human. The human soul is the one that graduates to the astral plane and is the one that attends the spiritual sessions. It still retains its concepts intact and does not know how to see or judge otherwise than according to what it sees. You, who are seeking the light, and who are perhaps a member of some sect or order of those who call themselves spiritual, observe the fruit of your teachers and leaders. They suffer from sickness and infirmity. They die of tuberculosis or cancer. They live on alms or demand certain contributions. Or they condemn money. They often suffer from slander and persecution. By their fruits you shall know them. They completely ignore the meaning of the basic laws. Their concepts are as wrong as yours. Who can teach you? They hold high-flown titles of supreme authority. Jesus said, "Call no man father, for one is your Father, which is in heaven." They wear garments unbecoming the age in which we live. They are still living in the remote past, in the pre-Christian era, when the fashion for men was the robe and mantle. Their ideas are in that era. They have not advanced a step. They restrict the freedom of action of their disciples, prescribe some foods, or impose others. They ignore the teaching of the one they claim to follow. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of his mouth. They have no notions of any science. What kind of a teacher is he who ignores the principle of vibration, third of the laws of Hermes, the best known and most popular of the enlightened ones of antiquity? By their fruits ye shall know them. It means that by their problems, their ailments, their poverty, that is, by their manifestation, you will be able to judge what their concepts are. Their books and texts emphasize punishment, threat, danger, inspire anguish and fear. Chapter 23 of Matthew, the evangelist, transcribes the words of Jesus concerning individuals. He calls them false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inside they are ravening wolves, and repeats, by their fruits you will know them. One does not pick grapes from thorns or figs from thistles. There are sects that radiate kindness and love of neighbor. Their intention and goodwill are unsurpassable, but they show a great ignorance of the basic principles of creation. Some people do not eat meat, claiming that animal flesh defiles man with its impure vibrations. They have no knowledge of the nature of these vibrations and their frequencies. You know that pure thought cannot receive the impure, and in fact neutralizes or transforms it, as light does the shadow. One of the few ways for the animal to advance rapidly in its evolution is to serve man. When the opportunity to serve presents itself to an animal, the spirit that governs its entire species shudders with joy, for as one animal in the group advances, so do all those behind it. Toward the human plane, the animal nature of man requires animal food in all degrees. Carnivorous, the big fish eats the little fish, until the time comes when man is guided by his divine being, and then the desire and need to eat animal flesh automatically disappears. It should not be forced. It cannot be forced. It is contrary to the universal plan. Excesses are normalized by simply looking at the truth of being more often. The more rudimentary the consciousness, the more sacrifice is needed to advance. The man who is forced to kill an animal for the benefit of a collective, far from committing a crime, provides a better opportunity. Within the animal kingdom, the law of the lower worlds prevails. When a human being kills a ferocious beast that threatens a community, for example, by killing a poisonous snake that endangers the lives of children, by eliminating pests that damage fruit trees or plants, or by eradicating pests that invade homes and torment people, he is not committing crimes but benefiting everyone, both humans and animals. Animals have no conscience, only guts. Vermin, for example, have the instinct to reproduce. Following their law, they spread too much. Man has the duty as an elder brother to watch over them and control them. When man attains spiritual consciousness, he no longer has to kill or attract any pests. Rather, to drive them away from his house, it is enough to speak to them and address the spirit that rules the group. I myself have witnessed such a miracle. I have seen an advanced metaphysician get rid of some cockroaches and mosquitoes that entered his house. The metaphysician said, "Brothers," referring to the spirits of the group, "watch over your wards. They are in disharmony. My house is not the proper environment for them." Then, speaking to the little animals, he said, "Go away, you little critters." And before my astonished eyes, these pests stood motionless for an instant, as if they had received a message, and then they ran away in terror. People in the sects we talked about don't know what you're hearing right now. They are struggling on the astral plane, or rather on the negative phase of the plane, because everything in creation has two phases. The soul is astral, and is where the senses and emotions reside. Without these, life would be meaningless, as we wouldn't be able to appreciate art, beauty, or music. It would be like comparing an old silent movie to a modern one with all of its color, sound, and amazing technical skills. The senses and emotions must be developed in the same way that talents are developed. Since they are divine gifts, they shouldn't be put down, ignored, or rejected. Instead, they should be balanced and adjusted. This is done by raising thought to the divine being and its truth whenever necessary. Excesses, emotionality and sensualism are regulated by the soul. We cannot, with our weak will, repress, restrain and frustrate our emotions and deny them and our senses without appealing to the truth of the divine being. It is to atrophy and even destroy them. It is to kill the soul or to wound and sicken it. When this happens, the human being is regressed to the animal plane or spends several lives trying to recover them. There are sects that teach that in order to make contact with God, one must prepare oneself, adopt complicated positions, and focus the mind on some part of the body, such as the space between the eyebrows or the base of the spine, and then pronounce a magic word. All of this belongs to the astral plane, and it communicates the being only with the psychic forces of the astral plane. What you are thinking about is the position of the body, the space between the eyebrows, the base of the spine. You are not thinking about God. You are not making contact with the divine being. The Bible says that God is present, and this is to be taken seriously, and, as it sounds, God is in everything, everywhere. He is present in you and everything around you. You don't have to look for him like you look for a needle falling to the ground. Psalm 46 says, "Cease and know that I am God," and that's all you have to do. Know what is present and think about it. You contact God by thinking about him, nothing else, practicing the presence of God. That is how you get to see him, feel him, and get close to him. Just like practicing on the piano, you become virtuous. The ghosts and apparitions seen in very old houses are the astral bodies of people who lived there but have since died. Their minds are stuck in the past and can't disconnect from it, so they don't know they are seeing them. They are living the life they lived in the house, as it was when they were human, with all of their ideas still intact. This world is made up of 7 levels of consciousness, or planes. As a person's consciousness grows, he moves from one level to the next. The mental plane is higher than the astral plane, and then there is the spiritual plane, which is the highest level of consciousness that we can imagine. There are many ascents that can be reached on this level, but it's not necessary for this discussion, as we are looking at the mental and spiritual planes and the rules that govern their attainment here on Earth. Today is the only day we can count on. Yesterday died, and tomorrow hasn't even come into being yet. There is no way to bring the future into the present. We have to wait to live it. To get ready for tomorrow, we have to be aware of today, live it fully and enjoy it, and forget about tomorrow. Many people spend their days sad about things that have already happened. Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead. You follow me, the life and the truth." Today has all the possibilities. It's a fresh start. If you start the day expecting good things to happen, they will. Think of the good, and it will come to you. By always looking backward, you are not only unconscious of the good that is before you, but you bring all the bad of the past into the present, just as one who insists on staying in a dark and pestilential room when there is an airy and sunny room beside it. This lesson is presented in the Bible in the case of Lot's wife, who was told by the angels to flee to the mountain, the spiritual plane, and not to look back, because she would be consumed. She did not listen. She looked towards the city she was leaving behind and became a sack of salt. Salt in the Bible is a symbol of crystallization, and you know what crystallization means in the subconscious, what it costs to dissolve it. He who lives in the past crystallizes it in the subconscious and does not advance a single step. He stops, and the future does not offer him anything. The past repeats itself in a constant wheel. The figure of the sack or statue of salt is very appropriate, for the very fact that the past, if it can be brought to the present, is that it is recommended to give thanks for all treatment as if it had already been manifested. The treatment must always be done in the present. It must wait for today. It does not work when it is thrown into the future. The future has not yet been created in earthly terms. God lives in an eternal present. This means that one must live only for today. Foresight is positive. Common sense expresses divine wisdom on earth, but one must not live in the past or fear the future. Emerson said, "There is nothing to fear but fear." Today always brings everything he will need. Today's expenses are always covered, and monetary anxieties are always about something future, never about the past or the immediate present. If you find yourself in a money predicament, it is because you anticipated that circumstance in the past, motivated by your concept. Raise your thought to the divine being with love. Unload your weight on it, and you will see the problem miraculously solved. Don't forget to give thanks before and after. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." And in the Old Testament, the same truth is expressed. Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he will sustain you. Never let the righteous be moved. You will see that this differs very much from the idea that still prevails, that the will of God is trial, sacrifice, punishment, and resignation. When in the Bible it speaks of the righteous and righteousness, it always refers to the righteousness of thinking, to the exactness with which truth is brought into focus in thought. Seek ye the kingdom of God and his righteousness means to seek the spiritual plane and the laws that govern it. In today's language, think what is good, and it will be given to you. Remember the divine being, and he will provide. Know the truth, and it will set you free, Jesus said. The terms truth, God, the divine being, the kingdom of God, and the kingdom of heaven are interchangeable. They mean the same thing. As the first words in what the Jews call the 10 Commandments, Jehovah said, "I am Jehovah your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, that is in the earth below, or that is in the water below the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them." The Jews took this to mean that they shouldn't put statues in their synagogues. Today, we see the meaning behind the symbol. We shouldn't make mental images that become real things in the sky, the earth, the water, the earth, or the sky. These images become idols, which we think are more powerful than God. However, we forget that the substance we use to make these images is God. Idols, or false gods, or fear, the inevitable, fate, evil, bad luck, good luck, the microbe, the virus, disease, danger, human frailty, human wickedness, jealousy, betrayal, accidents, death, struggle, money, and all that we have to endure and without which we cannot live. The list is much longer, but what has been said suffices to establish the idea. Everything we fear is an idol. We are worshipping it by fearing it, worshipping it above God. An example of the way in which preference is given to God is the following. I knew a boy who was deathly ill. His relatives informed me that everything, absolutely everything, had been done to save him, but that he was given up by all the most eminent doctors. I asked them, "Are you Catholics?" They replied, "Of course, and very devout." Then I suggested, "Then why don't you ask God?" They answered, "That is the only thing we have to do, but there is no more hope." I insisted, "But for God, nothing is impossible." They repeated impatiently, "But we have not told you that he is hopeless because of 4 medical luminaries, so why insist?" In other words, the medical luminaries must have decreed, and God Almighty had to bow his head before the superior sapience of 4 human ants. The poor people were unaware that they had already decreed the death of the sick boy some time ago. Before consulting the medical luminaries, they were already thinking that they would consider him dead. Death is of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, or of the knowledge of good and evil. Thou shalt not eat of it, For surely, if thou eatest thereof, thou shalt die. Genesis chapter 2. This is the first mention of death in the text left by Moses. God warned that death would come if one ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. First, in the Bible and in metaphysics, eating is the symbol of thinking. That is, when one eats, one appropriates the food, chews it, swallows it, and assimilates it. The same happens when one thinks. In the way described at the beginning of this book, one receives an idea, food, one thinks about it determinedly, chews it, it passes to the subconscious, swallows it, and becomes part of the individual. It is assimilated. The fruit of this process should not be eaten. In the digestive process, only very small children think of eating excrement. The fruit of the mental process is the external manifestation. That is, the circumstances and the experiences produced by the images that we have in the subconscious. This is the fruit. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is not a tree that exists somewhere. It is a symbolic figure that describes exactly the mental process and the laws that govern it. As we have the knowledge of the laws of creation already exposed in previous chapters, we are the tree that produces the fruit of that knowledge. We are warned in the text of Moses not to eat the fruit that we produce, that is, not to judge by what we see produced on the outside, not to form erroneous concepts based on what we see happening, for what happens is but the fruit of an inner knowledge of ours, either a knowledge or concept based on good, or a knowledge or concept based on evil. Again, let us not form an opinion based on what we see, for this would be eating the fruit. Let us consult with the divine being, and he the truth. He will always direct us in a straight line. Such an explanation, for example, is unintelligible to those who do not possess highly scholarly knowledge, and even the scholars miss the key. This is because they are saturated with images based on intellectual knowledge. Intellectual knowledge behaves like a tyrant that does not allow one to advance or to raise his head. Spiritual ideas in the Bible refer to the spiritual idea as a child, because it is pure and knows no evil. Those who are full of scholarship consider this to be only childish. The last link in the chain that starts with the first wrong thought is death. Let us imagine a rope with a knot in the middle. To the right of the knot, the rope reaches its end and has loosened and widened. On the other hand, to the left of the knot, the rope continues without us being able to see its end. In this analogy, an ant is standing in the center of the knot, watching where it is going. At the end, it decides on the rope to the right, because it sees that it is wider and more comfortable. When it reaches the end, it will fall into space. If it chooses the rope on the left, even though it is narrower, it will soon adjust itself and will remain firm and secure forever. This is the picture of what happens when one chooses between thinking negatively or thinking positively. The negative way seems the most comfortable, and it soon ends. The positive way is the small door and the narrow way that leads to life, although there are few who find it. The original sin is the decision that was made in the knot. Death is inevitable in the negative way. It is a natural result of that way, but nothing prevents us from turning back. We do not have to die. We solve it. Jesus said that death would be the last enemy we would defeat. He promised. The great advanced ones do not die. They only transcend. Moses transcended. Elijah transcended. Jesus did not die. The sacred scriptures do not say that he died. They say that he gave up the spirit, which in metaphysical lexicon means something very different. It is equivalent to projecting the astral body, the soul, out of the physical body. In surgical operations, physicians fill the physical body with ether, chloroform, or other substances of the same consistency as the astral body. The astral body is dislodged because the analogous substances no longer leave room for it in the body. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands of cases in which operated persons say in their sleep, I saw myself standing beside my body, and I have seen the whole process of the operation. The astral body is attached to the physical body by means of a thread of the same astral substance. When the astral body is separated from the physical body, they continue to be connected by this thread, which is elastic and can extend over great distances. The Bible calls it the silver cord because it has a somewhat luminous grayish color. As the operated patient eliminates the substance that has made him unconscious, the astral body occupies the physical body again. The astral body is the one that feels and is conscious. When it leaves the physical body, it ceases to feel and to be conscious. When the human being dies, the cord has been broken, the two bodies are separated, and the astral body continues to live. At the moment when Jesus exclaimed from the cross, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" he projected his astral body and ceased to feel anything else. His appearance was as if he were dead or in a state of deep faintness. After his body was placed in the mausoleum provided by Joseph of Arimathea, his astral body was reunited again with his physical body. Then the women of Jerusalem went to look for the body of Jesus, and a personage whom the church calls an angel made the remark to them, "And why seek ye him among the dead? Seek him among the living." It cannot be said more clearly, he was alive afterwards. He transcended, but for the adulteration. Made in the documents, it was convenient to put that he had resurrected, as if a being of such a high vibratory frequency could never die. As you clean your subconsciousness of the negative images, the cells of your body are transformed and become positive, and you are, as it were, returning to the goal of life. When you have finished learning the lesson you have to learn in this life you are living, you will not die. In the actual sense of the word, you will pass to the other plane without discomfort, without having had an illness. You will simply go one night, in the middle of sleep. In the saints of the Catholic Church, it is worthy of admiration the will to reach perfection that impelled them. However, due to their ignorance of the science of good and evil, they inflicted on themselves terrible tortures, which were not only unnecessary, but also constituted an unforgivable offense to their own bodies. The body itself is the temple of the divine being, and as such, we have the obligation to care for it and attend to it. The extreme degree of negative force represented by voluntary scourging and torture produces such a state of acidity that the poor body cannot bear it and breaks out in sores. It was for this reason that so many saints died in the last stage of tuberculosis. That is called serving God. As more people learn the laws of creation, the dark masses of error that permeate the planet will dissolve. The false images in the subconscious will disappear, the human cell will be reconstructed, and the number of people who die will decrease. Death will be the last enemy to be defeated, and the return to the path of life has already begun. It seems that in the next millennium, the truth will be universally known. Einstein argued that when the human cell is transformed into electrical energy, men will each know their own equation and will be able to disintegrate and reintegrate their bodies at will. Then, when the being leaves his physical body, which we know as death, and enters the plane that follows, what will surprise him most will be to see that everything he thinks will instantly manifest before his eyes. In that state, your thoughts will become reality immediately, for there being no inert matter to retard the process, the object or condition will appear simultaneously as you think it. This will cause him confusion that could be chaotic, leading him to believe that he is actually in purgatory or hell. For terror will like the condition, but family and friends will always be waiting to guide you and explain the conditions of the plane and reincarnation. And why do we remember nothing of what we were in previous lives? Students of truth always ask. How good it is so. How great is the love of God and His wise laws. First of all, if I were to ask you now what you did last Tuesday, unless it was an important date for you, you would answer me, "I don't remember. I would have to rethink it." You would waste your time rethinking something as useless, superfluous, and unprofitable as bringing the past to the present. What would you gain by reliving those past days? Nothing. You would probably relive something unpleasant, because there is always something unpleasant in the past. You have been a criminal, a prisoner, a woman of life, a slave, and so on. If you could recall those dead times, you would feel again how unhappy you were. If you could remember the time when you were queen or king, you would have a very hard time witnessing the injustices and wrongs you committed. Your soul today could not bear it. I will tell you what it feels like to go back in your mind to such a remote past. It is as if you were freshly bathed, polished and perfumed, and you were forced to get into a mud full of filth in which you could not move to get your head out and breathe. If any of your past lives were very splendid and gifted, when you return to your present state, you will feel very bad, very dissatisfied, and you will notice that this life is inferior to that one in material advantages. Life is a school, and each life is a degree more advanced than the last. If a life is full, and the one that follows it is poor, it is because something was wasted or not taken advantage of, and it is necessary to do it again. The love of God knows no hell. No one is eternally condemned. Everything has forgiveness. We all have a chance, and up to 70 times 7, as Jesus said. Karma is the law of cause and effect. Chance does not exist. Everything has a cause. Every cause has an effect. There is good karma and bad karma, you know them. It is the debt we incur for the bad and the collection for the good. The divine being is the Lord of karma. In its essence, it is not subject to karma, which means that it is possible to eliminate negative karma by directing our attention to the divine being and habituating ourselves to dwell in its abode. This is also mentioned in Psalm 91. When the human being acquires what is called spiritual consciousness, which is to be aware of complying with the laws that have already been expounded, in this state we are not under material laws, but under grace, and we have the right to invoke the higher laws. Many of the karmic effects are automatically dissolved by the effect that the individual often elevates his thought. He himself does not realize his privilege until he compares what happens to others and is avoided to him. At that moment, he is astonished, and it occurs to him that he is protected by an invisible presence. Once a person has learned to love everyone, no matter what, when he can understand why someone does what they do, when he feels like he has nothing to forgive because what was done to him was a normal part of evolution on a lower level, that person no longer needs to learn anything and doesn't need to go back to that level. The goal is love. People who were enemies in a previous life are often born mother and child in the next life to make them love each other. Nature always wants to bring people together through love, heal, and change people through love. Psalm 91 says, "He who dwells in the retreat of the Most High will dwell safely under the shadow of the Almighty." If you say this about the Lord, "My refuge and my fortress, my God, in him I will trust," it will lead to the conditions listed in the psalm. He will protect you from the predator's trap and the terrible disease. His truth is like a shield and a dagger. You won't have to worry about the terrors of the night, the arrows that fly during the day, the diseases that hide in the dark, or the death that lurks at noon. Try to figure out what these promises mean. Though 1,000 fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, you shall be safe. Under their care thou shalt not be touched. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold the reward of the wicked. Therefore thou hast said, O Jehovah, thou art my refuge, or for having made affirmation thy rule, and the Most High thou hast made for thy habitation, because in all things thou consultest the divine being. No evil shall befall thee, neither shall any plague touch thy dwelling, for he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. On the palms of their hands they shall bear thee up, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. That is, that thou mayest not have the least inconvenience, thou shalt tread upon the lion and the cobra. Thou shalt tread upon the young lion and the serpent, because he hath set his love upon me. I also will deliver him, I will set him on high, because he has known my name. The name is the biblical language of the nature of truth. He will call to me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble, save him, and praise him. I will give him long life, and I will show him my salvation. This is the sixth law of creation. Each cause has an effect, and each result has a cause. There is no such thing as chance or luck. Love can hide a lot of sins, according to the Bible. Jesus told Magdalene that she had saved a lot of meaty effects because she loved him so much. The idea of growth is the seventh rule of creation, which I already told you about. There are manly and feminine parts in everything that make it up. The first idea we talked about in this book, mentalism, is at the heart of all 8 rules. Generation shows up on all planes, though in different, more advanced forms. The basic idea behind it is the same, though. Jesus talked a lot about this world and the other world when he was an Aquarius. The other world also brought many changes to the end of the world. People once asked the apostles when the end of the world he had been talking about would happen. Jesus told them, "When you see the man in the water jar." We don't know if the apostles got it, but we do. Everyone knows that the zodiac sets the movement of the equinoxes. To put it more simply, it is a circle in the sky made up of groups of stars. Star law gives each group a name, and each month of the year is controlled by a different group of stars, or zodiac signs. One sign is for each month of the year. There is something called a ruler that goes with each sign and tells you about that sign's personality. But the zodiac has a greater meaning than that. Let's say there is a much, much bigger circle outside the small circle that forms the 12 months of a year. It's so big that it takes up room for about 2,160 years, which is the same as one sign of the zodiac. In other words, each sign and its master rule over people for about 2,500 years. As each age comes to a close, the sign that was in charge starts to fade away or move away. At the same time, the next sign's impact and the traits of the new boss start to be felt. In other words, this means that the sign has been the norm for all people for 2,000 years, and it can be understood completely. So, the sign that just passed was Pisces. It started to move away at the end of the 20th century. But during the whole time he lived, the fish had an effect on people. Christians base their name on Jesus being called the fish. They even used a drawing of a fish to help them remember where to meet. During that time, people were being hurt. The Catholic faith that ruled for 2,000 years unintentionally used the fish shape in many things, like the bishop's mitre, which looks like a fish head with its mouth open, and the Gothic shape of church doors. The human mood turned sad, like water from the sea, and they liked being in pain. Everything was melodramatic, novels were moving plays, and everything was as heavy as the sea. It was the time of the great sea journeys. Like everything else, water has 2 states, negative and positive. Negative states are when something is in touch with water for too long and rots, and positive states are when life begins, and there are many possibilities. That sign was black, which was a bad color for the end of the era. As we got closer to the sign of Aquarius, there was a response that people call a crisis. This is like when someone has a disease and all of their symptoms get worse just before they get better. A submarine was also made, which meant that the ship went deep into the water, making the fish-like shape even stronger, especially since it was silver. As the air sign Aquarius came into full bloom, the submarine grew wings and turned into an airplane, but it was still silver. Aquarius's personality is like a gardener's. He looks like a man carrying a bottle of water on his back. He always helps water the plants, but not too much. The gardener in heaven will take care of his plot, so that the plants bloom and people become perfect. At the gardener's feet, the sign has two skewed lines that stand for new thought currents, electric currents, changes in the air, and other things. Since it was found around the turn of the century, electricity has slowly crept into our lives, and now we live in, on, next to, and all around it. We're making new paths in the sky. Electricity has already finished and is now called electronics. This is the element that will change everything in a brand new era. The signs in uranium, which is named after the planet Uranus, change every so often. One sign is positive and the next is negative. Aquarius is a good sign for this time because it means that religions and science will come together. There won't be a single religion that rules like the Catholic faith did in the past. Everyone will agree on one truth. When a sign changes, the mind and the world change in big ways. The new sign gets rid of everything old and changes everything about it, so that the ground is clear for the new choices that the sign brings. This sign is white, it's the spiritual age, and it will be the best era in human history. The very scary and upsetting signs we're seeing only mean that Uranus, who is known as the destroyer, is using force to clean things up, taking away bad and old things to make room for new and lovely things is a good thing. Uranus is doing that. May he be blessed. During the time of the ancient patriarchs, they were known for being good shepherds. It was the goat sign of Aries. The Egyptians lived during the time of the bull, Taurus, because they raised cattle and worshipped them. There will be no more top bosses in this new age. There will be no more teachers, imperators, great masters, etc. The holy being, the Messiah, the chosen Christ, will tell everyone how to water their own yard. Note: remember this book, and don't think that reading it just once will help you understand everything it says. It's new, makes more sense, and is more interesting the second time you read it. This will happen every time you read it again, because the truth is a living force that wakes up cells that have been put to rest. When you start to use the rules you will learn here, you might see things that seem magical. You'll want to share what you've learned because you're excited, but you shouldn't try to persuade someone of the truth. You might be shocked to find that some people who you thought were open to you start to feel less friendly toward you. As the occult maxim goes, when the disciple is ready, the master appears. If someone asks you for advice, teach them with love. If you ask the divine being to speak through you, you will know what words to share. Noblesse oblige, as another maxim mentions, and those who learn the higher laws have the responsibility to use them correctly, more than those who do not know them. Never try to excel at the expense of others just because you possess this knowledge. He who believes himself to have the authority to use his knowledge to the detriment of others, or who because of his superior knowledge considers himself exempt from following the common rules of good manners, will face punishments, sometimes extremely severe, when attempting to circumvent the laws. The metaphysician stands out as an exemplary tenant, the closest friend, most loving parent, fairest ruler, most committed citizen, most respectful son, most dutiful debtor, most understanding employer, and most diligent employee.